You're listening to the Player Layer podcast. I'm your host, Ivan Alexiev, and today I've got with me the designer of Under Falling Skies, Tomáš, who is also a developer at Czech Games Edition. And we talk a lot about Under Falling Skies, which if you haven't played it, I highly recommend you download the print and play, because this game started out its life as a print and play made for a contest on Board Game Geek. It won a ton of awards because it is very innovative and just works so well with so few components. But now it will be published as a boxed retail game by Czech Games Edition, and I can't wait for that. They've made the game into a campaign. We also talked with Tomáš about developing other games, like he worked on Sanctum, which is another great game by Czech Games, and we talked about the differences between working as a designer versus working as a developer. On another note, before we start, I want to say that at playerlayer.net we have started doing blind testing and playtesting services. So if you've got a game that you want developed, or you want some eyes on the game, we have a great team. All of us are in the industry, and we've tested a bunch of games, so hopefully we can help you make the best game possible and see what your game needs, or give you another opinion. You can learn more at playerlayer.net. Thank you for listening. I am here today with Tomáš Uhlíř, who is the designer of Under Falling Skies. I did my best to pronounce his name. Tomáš, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I think you did really well with the name.
Thanks. Could you tell me, before we get to Under Falling Skies, which is a game I really, really like, and I say that often because usually I have designers whose games I like, but this one, it stands out in so many ways. Yeah, but first I want to ask you how you got into board games in the first place, and when did you start designing games?
Oh, it's at first it's really nice to hear about a game that you like it. And if you ask, I think I've been designing games like all the time I can remember. As far as I can remember. I remember times when I was really small, and with my brother, we haven't been playing like usual kids. We every time we've been playing with with Lego or whatever, it was some kind of a game or even a board game. So I think I started really early in this.
Mm-hmm. And did you, when you were playing with Legos, were you just making up the games as you played? Because that's what we did with my brother as well.
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes we make up the rules just as we go, and sometimes we just sit on it and say, okay, we want to make a game about this, and we first design the game and then we play it. So.
And then when did you get to playing more board games?
I think it started with those adventure books. Like those fighting fantasy and stuff like that. You probably know them. Then my dad bought us Hero Quest. You know Hero Quest? Of course you do.
Yeah. Of course, it's on Kickstarter right now. Actually, the new printing by Hasbro.
So I think that was one of the first real big board games we've played, and from there we go through many others. We switched to some more typical Euro games from this, and since then I'm playing them every time I have time.
Mm-hmm. And what were you doing outside of board games? From what I know right now, you're actually working in board games with Czech Games. Is that right?
Oh, it's right. It's almost I think it's over a year now. And before that, I'm a studied architect, I think it's quite common for game designers. It's like most of the game designers I know, they're either architects or programmers. So
yeah, it's fun. It's funny that you say that because my brother's an architect and we design games together. And
yeah, I think it requires a similar skill set, quite similar to the process when you design a building, let's say. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
And then when did you start publishing your games? I know Under Falling Skies was in Board Game Geek. It's your fourth game, I think, on BGG.
Here in Czech Republic, we have this organization. It's called Czech Board Games. It's similar like Czech Games Edition, and actually they started as one company. And their first game was Through the Ages. So the first edition of Through the Ages was actually published by Czech Board Games. And just the next year, they like divided and they started like a new publishing company called Czech Games Edition. And actually, my first game was with Czech Board Games. It was called Laborigines, and it's a really wacky game. It's about like a figures made from clay or some kind of clay, and you are moving around the board and doing some stuff. And I think it was a really early design of mine. So when looking at it from today's perspective, I must laugh about it. But that time it was really fun to design it. But I think I actually really started to design games like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and one of the first successful designs was it's called Spring on a String in English. It's Louka jak vyšitá in Czech, and it's very very strange pick of components because the board of the game is made of felt. And you use like shoelaces and you're like sewing through the board and picking some flowers and such. So,
I had a look at the game. It looked very interesting. Just like Under Falling Skies also feels very innovative because of that type of dice placement. And probably my favorite part is the way the AI works in the game. Like whenever you place dice, you also know how the aliens are gonna move. You designed that game for a contest first for BGG 9-card print and play, right?
That's right. Yeah.
How long?
In 2019.
Yeah. How did you? First of all, how did you decide on the theme and mechanics of the game?
I mean, actually, in this game and in these contests in general, when you have such a strong restriction, then you have to start with this restriction in mind, because what can you do with 9 cards and a few components? So when I started to thinking about this game, it was I thought, okay, so I can have a card, and what can I put on the card? How can I use it to its fullest? And the same way I was thinking about the dice in the game. And since I'm mostly a Eurogamer, I don't like too much randomness in the games, and at least it needs to be a randomness that gives you some variety and that doesn't write your actions. So I was thinking, what can I do with this simple die? And I try to come up with as much things as I can think about, and what can be done just with the die. I mean, you can use it to power your actions. You can use it both to power the enemy actions. You can use the number on the die. You can use the place where you put it, and also the timing should be important. So this is how it started. So I put all those ideas together and try to come up with a working mechanic for it.
Yeah, and it's very elegant in that it's both simple and at the same time, like when I first saw it, my first association was, wow, he's using roll and move for the enemies, because it's such a simple thing, you know, and you just have to make that choice, and you have to and you know that there's a lot of choices in the game for being just 7 cards on your map and 5 dice. There's so many choices because you need to fill each one of those rows, and it feels very just everything feels very tight and very connected because you're both blocking yourself and trying to do certain things. How long did it take you to get from your initial idea to that print and play contest?
Actually, with this one, it was surprisingly easy. I mean, I'm used to, like, when working on a game, it's a really long process, and you first need to come up with several different ideas and trying them, and before you get to somewhere. And with Under Falling Skies, it was really fast. I mean, the first idea was that I want to use the die both for your actions and for the enemy actions. And out of this, I was thinking about it maybe for a week, I think, before I made the first prototype. And actually, the first prototype was very similar how the final game looks like. I mean, there were only really small changes from that. And I mean, when I played for the first time, I was really surprised how well it works. I mean, I thought, okay, so maybe I'm up to something because it was against all my my previous experience. I mean, usually it's a really painful process to get to this point, and this worked just from the very beginning. So it was really fun working on it because of that.
And how different is the version that's going to come out now from that first PNP version?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big decision how we want to approach the boxed version of the game, because the print and play version is quite successful and it's out there for some time already. So we need to give players something more, some reason why they want to buy the boxed game. And one of the ideas was to introduce some kind of campaign, which adds both the variety and also some narrative to the game. But I still kept in mind that I want the game to be really this simple as it is now. I mean, as the print-to-play version. Because I think it's the big strength of the game, that it's interconnected and elegant and quite easy to grasp, while being quite deep when you play it. So I was really careful about adding new stuff to the game. I add only a little, and everything I add into the game has like a huge impact. I mean, it should have some impact. It shouldn't be only some difficult rule that don't add actually anything to the game. So I really tried hard to keep it compact and simple. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard that the campaign version is also not only is it replayable, but you've packed the box in a way that you take out components as you get to them, just the way that you stack them up, which I think is quite cool.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I quite like the legacy concept of games, but there are things about it that I'm not so. That I don't appreciate it much. I mean, that you throw away lots of stuff and also that you're destroying some things, or when you play through the whole game, then you kind of destroys it. I mean, you can't return to some point and play it at that point because maybe it was more fun in the middle of the game than at the end of the campaign. And this is something I wanted to avoid with this campaign in Under Falling Skies. So I made it in a way that as you go through the campaign, you both learn new stuff that are added to the game, like there are some new, let's say, new rooms or new mechanics and everything, and you learn about them as you go through the game. So it's not that overwhelming from the start, but you add the complexity as you go. At the same time, it adds a lot of variety because everything you gain through the campaign, you can use in your standalone games. So So you don't play like with 4 underground-based setups like in the print-play version, but here you have like 17 different cities, each of them with different base setup and different special ability and stuff. So it should be much more variable than the original version.
Yeah, and I really like that you're taking the best from legacy games, in my opinion, which is, new content and that tutorial feeling, which is, you're ramping up the game as you play more. That's one of the problems that I've had with legacy games when I've played them, is sometimes you start a game with a group that doesn't want to finish it, so in the end you can't really get a new player in there. We had that situation with Pandemic Legacy.
How long did you take to play through the whole Pandemic Legacy?
We did not. That's what I'm saying. We only played 3 months, and then 3 months in the game, and then 2 players dropped out of the game. They didn't want to play it anymore, and it's sitting on my shelf right now, collecting dust. Yeah. And I think my plan would be to continue solo, just to finish it by myself.
Because we finished it with my group, we finished it quite recently, and it took us over a year to get through the whole campaign.
Yeah, we started it. We started it in January, I think, is when we started it, and then played, I think, till month 3 or 4, and.
But I think that's the thing, because in these legacy games you need a group of people, and they need to meet like every time at the full group, and that's very difficult. But I think it's a format that works really well for solo games, because then you don't need these other people to get around, and so I think it fits the Under Falling Skies pretty well in this manner.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I think for a solo game campaign, having a campaign is probably the best way to, or solo is best for campaigns, because otherwise it's so hard to get people together. Like even now we're playing Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion with a group, and the guy who owns the game, he's playing 3 or 4 different with different groups, and. He's like, okay, which mission are we with you guys? And then, so, whilst with a solo game, you can always know where you're at. But like, I watched Paul Grogan do a run through of your game, Under Falling Skies, and he said that he really likes that it can be played co-op, is what he said, because you can, with puzzle games like that, you can discuss what you want to do best, and just make that decision together.
Yeah, I think that I quite like cooperative games, but with most of them there's this alpha player problem, obviously. And for me, the one of them that really works is Space Lair, because of this time pressure thing. And usually it's a problem with this alpha player. But I think why it works for Under Falling Skies is because those decisions are not obvious. I mean, every time you need to compare those pros and cons for each decision, and there's usually not the one best approach or the one best decision. So there's always something you can discuss within those two or 3 players.
Yeah, and I really like the white die mechanic, which gives you the reroll of all other dice. So you never actually know all the dice you have. And you can choose when to use it and when to play those 2 white dice, but you're re-rolling at least once.
Yeah. That's from my perspective, it's probably the best mechanic in the game. So that's what makes it so enjoyable, because you you don't have the full information from the start. So yeah, you can't just solve it.
Mm-hmm. You have the choice of when to randomize, and at the same time it's. Very Euro in the sense that you get the random numbers, but then you get to make the choice, which is different than making the choice and then getting the randomness, like a lot of other dice games.
Definitely.
Could you tell me more about what you do in Czech games now?
I mean, right now, most of my time in Czech Games Edition now was spent with Under Falling Skies, because the development process, it was really intensive and quite exhaustive as well. But usually I'm there for marketing stuff and for game development stuff. So I was also involved in development process of Sanctum, which came out like last year. That's about the time when I started in Czech Games Edition. So let's see what I will be doing in the future, because now, as I said, most of the time was occupied by Under Falling Skies. But it was a great experience, because I think it's something that most of the designers are not allowed to make that much decisions about the development process of the game. I mean, usually you just give the game to the publisher and they just change it in a way they feel it's the best for the game, and they publish it. But here I was the one who was making most of those decisions, or at least like discussing them. So it was really great in this matter.
And how do you compare being a developer of someone else's game versus designing and developing your own game?
I think when you helping someone else, there's lots of communication involved, because you obviously you have your own ideas how the game should be I don't know, changed or developed, but you still need to respect the designer, the author of the game. So you're mostly trying to make some suggestions, and you always communicate with the designer. So yeah.
Yeah, and in a game like Sanctum, or any game that you work on as a developer, how much of the choice is left up to the designer by the publisher?
I mean, it really depends. Mostly about the designer himself, because some designers prefer to just give you the game and just let you publish it, and some designers want to control like every piece of the game and being there for the whole process. So it really depends. But the thing is that in Czech games, we are used to like put lots of effort into the game to make it the best way possible. So usually there are quite big changes on the games, and so it usually changes. I mean, from the initial idea or initial pitch of the game.
Mm-hmm. And how many developers usually work on a single game?
This is also interesting about Czech Games, because it's a quite well-known publisher, but it's still quite a small company. I mean, at least when looking at the number of employees and stuff. And we're used to like discuss all the things together. I mean, everyone in the company can have a voice and can make a suggestion about the game, and we're using some really powerful tools, online tools, where we like discuss everything involving the graphics and rules and playtesting and everything. So it's mostly the effort of the whole company. But the initial team, the initial development team, it's usually small. It's mostly about the graphic designer, someone who's leads the project, and maybe like 3 more people who are more involved in the process.
Mm-hmm. Now that you're doing this full time, do you still find that you play games outside of working on them?
Yeah, I really try. It's definitely more difficult. I mean, at least when you imagine that you spend the whole day working on a game or on the games, and then you went back home, or you even working from home. So, and then you just imagine you will play another game. It's but I still do, and I still try to play at least those new games coming out, and those that looks they should be really interesting. So yeah, I really do. It doesn't apply. I think it doesn't apply to all people in the company, because as I said, when you working on games the whole day and then playing game afterwards, it's a bit difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the games as well, though. Because I just started doing blind playtesting and some development work, and sometimes I actually want to play the games I'm working on more, especially when they're closer to finishing, and you see you already see the graphic design, you see all of the artwork, and it's just it becomes really enjoyable. Whilst in the earlier phases, it can be quite exhausting, you know.
Yeah.
What inspires you to make a game? Like you said, for Under Falling Skies, it was the restriction of the components. What usually makes you want to make a game?
I mean, for me, it's quite similar as for Under Falling Skies, because it really helps me to have some kind of restriction or limitation, or at least some starting point to for when I can start thinking about the mechanism and everything. And when I starting to work on a game, I usually start with something that I haven't seen before. I mean, I take, for example, some well-known mechanic, for example, this dice placement or whatever, and I try to figure out what else can be done with this well-known mechanic. So yeah, that's it. But I have probably, like any other designer, I have like notebooks full of some ideas and doodles and everything. So, and time to time, I just go through through my notes and see if something catches my eye, and I can like work on it a bit further. So.
Yeah, and what games are you playing with your group at the moment, or some games that you like by other designers?
The current trend is to have a really heavy Euro games with lots of stuff thrown in, like I don't know. For example, we are now playing with my brother the Maracaibo, which I quite enjoy playing. But for me, this design is a bit overwhelming in a way that there are so many small rules and so many components, and the setup takes a really long time. And so while I still like playing it, I think it doesn't have this elegancy. So I really appreciate like games that are both deep and elegant. And so few of my all-time favorites are, for example, Through the Ages, or even Agricola, or Brass is a really brilliant design. So.
Well, we actually we really love a lot of games by Czech designers. Like Mage Knight is one of the ones that pops into mind. I think that's one of our favorite games when we have the time to play it. I want to ask you about the situation in the Czech Republic, because there's so many games that come out of there. How do you think that? Do you know how that started out?
That's an interesting question, because I think it's maybe because we have quite enthusiasm designers in Czech Republic. I mean, Vláďa Chvátil, Vláďa Suchý, and such. And I think they really help this trend in Czech Republic. But it's really difficult to say. I mean, in Czech Republic, there are, even more and more people these days are discovering board games and the whole hobby. So it's growing really fast, I would say.
Yeah, it's definitely growing. There's such a huge concentration, I feel like, good designers from the Czech Republic. What do you do when you have moments where you see a game isn't making the progress you would want it to be making, and if you ever have some kind of roadblock or something?
Yeah, all the time. I think it's quite common when you're designing a game. And what I usually do, and when I really got stuck, then I just put the idea aside, and I try to return to it later and see if it works, if I can figure it out how to get past it. So as I said, I have like lots of those small ideas that I just got stuck in some point, and I try to return to them in the future. And very often when I'm working on something, then I have this portfolio of ideas that I can just pick some of them and put them into the new design or use them in a different way when it really works. So yeah.
And how do you build that portfolio? Is it a notebook?
It has many different ways. I mean, I have something on a single sheet of paper, something just in a notebook, something in my computer, so something in the form of a prototypes. It depends.
Mm-hmm. And
I'm not that organized when it comes to this. So.
Yeah. And when you do make a prototype, how do you usually test it? Your testing groups, or like Under Falling Skies, did you test it with a lot of other people, or because it's a solo game? And
yeah, I did. I mean, it was quite easy for Under Falling Skies because obviously you can test it by yourself. But I also gave it to quite a lot of other people, which I think is not that common when it comes to these BGG contests, because I mean, I'm very lucky about this, that I have people around me who are eager to test those games, and I think not everyone has this opportunity. So it helps a lot to progress on the game. We also have, with my brother and other friends, we time to time we do some game jams together, like over the weekend or just one day, and we just try to come up with an idea within this 1 or 2 days, and so that also helps pretty much.
Do you find that you practice design in any specific ways, meaning like imagining how the game plays out, or looking at other games and seeing what could be better?
I think I started as almost any other designer, like house ruling some stuff in other games. So, for example, I made a big house ruling or even an expansion for Zombicide, if you know Zombicide Black Plague. So I made the whole, overhelm of the game. It's called Zombicide Dark Ages, and. And I did a similar thing with lots of other games. So that's something that helps you to get to the point where you're able to design your own game, like starting with something that works already and changing only some smaller stuff, and before you can come up with something completely new.
Yeah, that's something that we do with my brother whenever we get a new game, and before we know the rules well. Whenever we have a rule come up that we're not sure about, we don't immediately go to the rule book, but we try and make up a rule and see if it works. And then at the end of the game, we see what the designer did and what the publisher did and how the rule actually goes, which we've found to be really helpful.
That's really cool.
Yes.
I wonder how often you just get the rule right.
Sometimes it really depends on how important of a rule it is and how big of a rule it is. If it's like, sometimes the game would work well, and other times the rule that we made up doesn't work so well, and then we have to figure out, we try and figure out why didn't this work before we go to the rule book and see the answer. Yeah, sometimes we do, sometimes we get them right.
Anyway, it's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
You should try it sometime.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I think cool house rules come out of that idea lots of times, and sometimes we can't go. Sometimes we can't go back to the real rules after deciding it.
That's a problem. I mean, sometimes it's really interesting to read the rules after a long time you've been playing the game already, because this way we figured out that we played like half of our games wrong in some place. I mean, we had some really important rule wrong and playing the whole time with this mistake, and the game worked. It was a bit different, and it was really surprising when we figured it out.
Yeah, sometimes it works. Mage Knight is a big one for us because every time we forget about some rules because there's so many of them. Though for Mage Knight, I spent a lot of time doing the tutorial and making sure we got it right. But when we go in a game, we just don't we don't like having that give me 5 minutes until I find the rule. And I much prefer doing it all at once at the end. But Mage Knight is a big one, like with all of the attacks and all the defenses. Have you played it, by the way?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Like I started like many times. I mean, I remember that every time I read a whole rule book and we play one game, and then when we don't get to it like again for a long time, so the next time I need to read again and start all over. So it's really difficult to return to it.
Yes, yeah. It's the same. We've only played it around maybe 4 times, which is a long time to play it. 4 games is very long. But yeah, every time you have to reread the majority of the rule books or a lot of the rules, or make them up as you go along. What are your plans for the future? Are you working on any other games while you're finishing Under Falling Skies? You said that you finished the rulebook this week.
Just yesterday, so. But I told myself that I can't work on any other game while the Under Falling Skies is not finished, because it draws lots of attention from it. So now I finally have time to start working on something else. But as I said, since finishing the game was really intense, I mean, for example, the last night, we spent the whole night on the rulebook, and I went sleep like at 6 a.m. or something. So, I think I need some time to regain the energy and the creativity before I start with a new game. But I wonder how long will it take, because I already started to thinking about new stuff, and so let's see. Yeah, I have a few ideas in my sleeves.
I think we're coming towards the end of the podcast, and I usually ask the question: what would your advice be for people who want to start out designing, or who have started out but are still in the early stages?
I would say be prepared that everything takes much more time than you expect, and be prepared to dedicate this time to it if you really want to finish the game, and probably don't give up, because that's something I often do when I get stuck. I just give up on this idea, because it's easier to start a new one than finishing this one and going through this problem in design. So, and when you don't give up, I think you finally get there. Sometimes it's a really painful process, but especially like getting this idea on the table, like building the first prototype. That's probably the most painful part of the process. When you already have something, then it's much easier and much more enjoyable.
Yeah. For sure. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, and I hope you enjoy your free time now that the rulebook is done.
Definitely. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It was a really nice talk.